welcome back to the Self Starter Podcast. My name is Nicole Lauren, and I am so excited to have an amazing guest here. This is Aislinn, and she is a business coach for creatives. She was actually a wedding photographer for a long time, and she just pivoted into coaching, I think about a couple of years ago. Aislinn, is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
So I'm really excited to have her. She is like seriously a powerhouse woman. She has so many amazing clients that she's working with. She has so many amazing strategies. I'm so excited for her to tell you more about herself. So without further ado, Aislinn, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi guys, my name is Aislinn. You can also call me Ace, and I was a luxury wedding photographer for 14 years. I retired and became a business coach in 2022. And that whole transition right there was like such an amazing experience to be able to go from this space of what I had mastered into something that felt so new and fresh, but also felt so incredibly fulfilling. So, over the past few years, I have been helping wedding creatives and other creative business owners to scale their businesses. I help a lot with mindset. I also help a lot with processes and workflows and really just kind of like bridging that gap between like the creative brain and the logical brain and being able to bring them together so that you can have the business that you want and the business that you dream of. So I'm so excited about our podcast today. I know that we're going to have an amazing conversation and that this is going to be so, so fruitful.
I love that. That's amazing. Yeah. I think the coolest thing about your business journey is that, like you said, you mastered an area like wedding photography, and you're kind of like honestly being a little humble, in my opinion. Like, you're an amazing wedding photographer from what I can tell. I don't think I was following you back then, but I have looked and creeped on all your Instagram and all that. So, what do you feel like is something that photographers maybe don't know, or something that you wish more photographers knew, based on your experience in that realm, but now coaching wedding pros?
Oh my gosh, that is such a big question. There's so many different ways I can go with it. And as far as being humble, I mean, I'll throw a couple accolades out there just so you guys know. So the last couple weddings that I photographed were around 15 to 17K for wedding photography. I was published in Martha Stewart Weddings twice. I was published in Brides, Style Me Pretty, Southern Weddings. There's a lot of different accolades there that I can throw out there. But I think the biggest thing that I look back on my career and I think like, wow, this was the thing that I did was the way that I made people feel.
Mm,
So I think back to some, especially some of my COVID clients, like that season of life was so difficult for so many different reasons. And to be able to be a grounded presence when there's so much chaos going in the world is truly something that I feel like
yeah.
I wish more people did that. And not just because like you're in like a season of chaos, because like we all experience that during that season, but like to be able to be a more grounded presence for your clients, truly, I think is the legacy that I would want more people to be leaving within the industry.
I love that. That's amazing. And that really is like honestly the next level of service. I just went to a conference back in April, and I was just like honestly shocked, like in a good way, pleasantly surprised. There were so many other people in the room who were very high end luxury photographers in that space of like 10K, 15K, 20K weddings. Not the weddings are 20K, but that they're charging that much for photography. And I just was in awe of how much of a different, like honestly, like an energetic difference, like in the space of like that realm is so much more experience focused. It's so much more artistic. It's so much more service driven versus just, okay, yeah, we can do pretty photos, I can be a good photographer, but it's like almost this next level of, this is the experience, this is how I make people feel, this is how I see them, I'm like there for them, throughout this whole day. Like, it's just such a different vibe. So I would love for us to like tailor this conversation towards like leveling up that wedding experience, because I feel like so many of us, like I hear in, Facebook communities and like all over, even in my own mastermind program that I have, I've heard so many people talk about how inquiries are low, they're slow right now, things are not going well, we're not booking and things like that. And I feel like, I don't know, honestly, I'd love your take on whether you think inquiries are slow or whether it's like a process issue. But yeah, tell me all the things about, booking and how to up level your wedding process.
Yeah. So for me personally, like I also have like multiple clients who are wedding professionals, and I tell them all the time you can feed into whatever story you want to feed into. If
Yeah.
you want to play into the game of inquiries are slow, to use that as an excuse to not go out there and show up and not go out there and, get leads and to make connections and network, if you want to use that excuse, okay, go for it. It's your life, it's your business. You get to choose that. That's absolutely something you get to choose. I also want to kind of encourage people who are listening to this and encourage my own clients around this that like we are in charge of our own excitement and we are in charge of the momentum in our business.
Yeah.
So if you are noticing I'm feeling like kind of unclear or I'm feeling like I am not getting a lot of inquiries or I'm not doing a lot of things, I want you to do like an internal audit and an internal reflection of how am I leading myself? How am I going out there and showing up and networking? Or am I like just saying like, oh, people are going to come to me or only the dream clients are going to come through my door. That's the only way my business is going to run.
Mhm.
Because that's like, to me, like that's not a very like good receiving energy when you're like just kind of like waiting for the world to show up for you when you're not willing to show up for yourself.
Yeah.
So when I hear people talk about like, oh, inquiries are slow, my immediate response, like internally, I probably won't say this out loud, but internally is just kind of like, all right, enjoy that. Enjoy. Go have fun. You know what? If you want to believe that inquiries are slow, you get to believe that.
Mhm.
However, it is a choice,
Mhm.
and your choice is what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
So I think that's the mindset shift I would give in this particular instance, like if somebody were to be saying that around me or to me.
Yeah, I love that. That's real good. That's the truth. That's facts right there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so tell me, I know you're a big process girl and you had an amazing process when you were a photographer. And now, even now as a coach, you have an amazing process with your clients. So walk me through that whole process, I guess you could say. The process of
Yeah.
your process. Yeah.
So, as far as like when I was a wedding photographer, I want you guys to recognize that I did it for 14 years. So, like when I talk about process, it was refined over the age of 16 through 30. Like, I was in it for a very long time. So, I could sit here and talk about my process when I was 21. I can talk about my process when I was like in the last couple years of my career, and those are all going to look slightly different, but there's always this commitment to a client experience where it is a win for my client and it is a win for me.
Mhm.
So if I am doing something out of people pleasing, or I am doing something where it's really not a win for my client, but it's a win for me, that's never going to feel good, and vice versa. If it's a win for them, but it's not a win for me, I'm going to feel resentment around that. So for me, it was always so important to clean up my process as I went. And this is something I talk to my clients about all the time. If something sucks in your business and you don't like it, it's your job to change it. It is
Yeah.
not your client's job to change it. It's not your job a year down the road from now to change it. It's your job to change it now.
Mm.
So when I think about my process, and we were kind of chatting about this a little bit, when I think about my process, I think about it from like a very 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
So you have like a process that you take your clients through from point A, which is them inquiring with you, all the way through point B, which is them having their gallery delivered if you're a wedding photographer. And
Mhm.
what I see so often with wedding professionals is that they don't think of it as like these little itty bitty, like broken up processes. They think of it as just this one giant process. And they're like, oh, like I have so much that I need to do for this one giant process. And if you would break it down into the inquiry process, the consultation call process,
Mhm.
the onboarding process, the engagement session process, the in-person sales or album sales process, the actual wedding day process, the post-wedding day process. If you would break it down into sections like that, you would be able to master each part of that and refine each part of that. And it would give your clients a much better, more intentional experience rather than just looking at it like, okay, I have to take them from inquiry all the way through like gallery delivery. Hopefully it works out. So
Mhm.
that's kind of my thought process on my wedding photography process and
Mhm.
kind of what I talk to my wedding photography clients about.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good point. I feel like it's also really easy for us to get overwhelmed as business owners if like something like let's say we're not booking or something's not working in that grand process, right? It's easy for us to get overwhelmed by all of it instead of like you're saying like getting narrowly focused and saying, "Okay, maybe not the whole thing's broken. Maybe it's just this one thing and I can piece that out or parcel that out and say, "Okay, what is working? What's working now? What do I need to change?" And then like almost I don't know, sometimes I feel like we want to just burn everything and start over. And that's not always like, I mean, maybe sometimes you need to do that, but like it's not always the most practical or the most efficient thing. And actually, like tweaking small things, making those small adjustments to each part of the process one at a time to see what's working, what's not, I think is so valuable. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
awesome.
used to, the reason why my process got better and better and better and better over the years is because it didn't change that much from when I was charging 5K to when I was charging 10K and when I
Mhm,
was charging 17K. It
mhm.
really didn't change that much. It just got more refined over
Yeah,
time. And
yeah,
if I had burned it down every single time I raised my prices or burned it down every single time I was like, oh, I need to like, change my editing style because no one's hiring me.
yeah,
And these are real things that people say to me.
yeah,
Like, they'll be like, do I have to change my editing style? And I'm like, no, you just need to be better at sales. Let's fix
yeah,
that.
yeah,
But like if you were to like change everything about your business every single time something is quote unquote not working,
yeah.
you are limiting yourself in your growth because you are
Mhm,
taking away the possibility of being able to actually hit the like point of refinement. So I think
mhm,
that's such a important thing to think about is like I had Dubsado forms from 2017 that I used all the way through 2022. They just got slightly different.
mhm.
Slightly like once I figured out what worked, it just like slight tweaks over time.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear for your business as well. Like, is that the case for you? Like, do you feel like you're like a refinement person?
Definitely. I think I am. There's been things like, especially recently after I went to this conference, there's like, especially with my inquiry process and like consultations, it's looked a little bit different after going to this conference. And we can maybe get into the inquiry and consultation process here in a second. But yeah, for the most part, I do feel like it's just refining, it's just figuring out what's going on. And I feel like when I make those small tweaks and I back it with data and I actually see, I don't do it based on emotions. I used to do that. But when I do it based on data and I see, okay, this small website thing, did that increase clicks? Did that increase conversions? Did more people fill out my contact form because I did that? And making a small tweak and then seeing if it works instead of like, oh my gosh, I'm emotional, no inquiries are coming in. I just need to like scrap the whole thing. I need to get a website redesign and I need to, you know, I don't know, whatever it might be. I feel like sometimes I hear people say that and I'm like, okay, I've been there before. I'm not judging because like I feel like I've been there before. But yeah, having those moments where you make those small tweaks and it's like the consistent part of your business and then backing that up with data and seeing, okay, did that work, did it not work? So yeah, I do agree, I think it's a refinement process for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have a
definitely.
question for you. I
Okay.
think something, so when you were talking, something that popped up for me was, let's say, these listeners, right? Maybe they're feeling this way. Maybe they're feeling like their wedding photography business. A lot of my audience is photographers. Some of them are just creative, other creative business owners, but a lot of them are photographers. So let's say that they're feeling maybe like something in their business isn't working. Maybe they are discouraged in some shape, form, or fashion. How do you approach your clients in kind of like assessing where to start? Like, how do you pinpoint where to start with your clients? I think that might be kind of interesting. And then, maybe kind of pique their curiosity to maybe hire you in the future too. So, yeah, walk us through that process.
Definitely. So one of the first things I usually ask my clients is, how do you know?
Hmm.
If a client comes to me and they're like, I just don't feel like, anyone's inquiring, like whatever, whatever, I ask them, how do you know?
Hmm.
So a lot of times, like what will happen is people forget that they actually did have inquiries, they just didn't book you. Or that you
Hmm.
actually did have consultation calls, but you only booked one out of the 10 that you've had in the past couple of weeks. And so we get into this headspace of it's not working instead of like looking at the actual facts versus the feelings. So that's
Yeah.
usually the first like place that I start is like I want to know what the actual facts are. So in my signature program is called SAP Success Accelerator Program, and it's for wedding professionals optimizing their business and mindset and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
in there in Q1, at the end of Q1, I asked them for their data. So I asked them like, how many weddings did you like book? What were your like how many inquiries did you have? What
Hmm.
was your conversion rate? Like how many people like had a call but they didn't actually book you, or how many people inquired but didn't get to the call? Because what that tells me is, do we have a like gap between inquiry and getting on a call with you? Do we
Hmm.
have a gap between getting on a call with you and booking you? Or do
Yeah.
we have a gap where people are coming to your website and we can see that through data and clicks, but they're not actually inquiring with you? So
Yeah.
that right there usually will tell me, like, if it's a, people love to say that it's lead gen, but it's actually not. It's
Mhm.
actually your inquiry process. And
Mhm.
there is a lot of people who have a lot of leaks in their inquiry process that they don't even know are a problem until they get to a point where they're like, no one's booked me in a while. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like let's look at the facts here. Let's look at like the data here, and then let's make some judgments based on that, and like let's make some actions based on that. So that's
Mhm.
usually where I start with my clients. The other thing I do is I inside of my program, we do Friday wins. So every single Friday, they come in and they tell me their wins. So if I remember 2 weeks ago, you booked a Hawaii wedding, and you're sitting here 2 weeks later telling me, I haven't booked anybody in so long and my business is not going well. I, as your coach, am going to remind you,
Mhm.
hey, do you remember 2 weeks ago you booked someone? And they'll be like, oh, I forgot, because it's not right in front of them. So I think that's one of the things is like having accountability, having like the ability to look back on the actual facts, because your brain would love nothing more than to tell you that everything is going like wrong if
Yeah.
you cannot back it up with the actual proof of like what's happening. So that's
Mhm.
kind of where I would take that as a coach.
I love that. That's so good. Finding the gaps and really just determining where exactly the problem is so helpful. Yeah, I love that. Tell me more about, so I guess maybe tell me more about when you work with clients, what are some of your favorite ways to help them up level, specifically their wedding businesses? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I love that. So inside of SAP, I have clients in there who are charging $3,000 for wedding photography. I have clients in there who are charging $8,000 for wedding photography. I've had clients go from 6,000 up to they're now charging 11,000 for photography. So
Mhm.
like I've had a lot of different clients in a lot of different like kind of phases of their wedding photography business.
Mhm.
And what I really like to do just really depends on the client and what they're
Yeah.
trying to do. So one of the questions I like to kind of like ask my clients and get a better like feel for is like, are you trying to charge more?
Mhm.
Like, is your goal to charge more? Like, do you want to be a quote unquote luxury photographer? Is
Yeah.
that your goal? You want a specific aesthetic for your weddings? Is that what we're trying to do here?
Mhm.
Or are you trying to make more income and you think that you have to charge more because you want to make more
Mhm.
income, and obviously logistically you're like, well, of course I have to charge more in order to make more income, but the truth is there's actually easier ways to make money where you might not have to raise your prices. So that's
Mhm.
another question I like to ask them. And then the final question is, are you trying to just make it a better process for you that feels more sustainable? So
Mhm.
when we're thinking about up leveling our business, we really have to kind of ask ourselves these questions of like, what am I actually trying to do here?
Mhm.
Am I
Mhm.
like just trying to make this feel better for me and I like the prices and the clients that I have? Am
Yeah.
I trying to like basically like up level into a certain aesthetic and a certain market? I want to work with a certain type of people because I think that's what I should do. Or
Yeah.
is that actually the goal? So
Mhm.
really just asking yourself kind of like what you're doing here will really help you to understand what you need to do to up level. So for
Mhm.
example, I had a client who she was charging 6,500 and now she's charging 10K. She's booked multiple weddings at 10K.
Mhm.
She went through SAP and that was the thing that she really wanted. She wanted to be able to take on less weddings at a higher price point so that she could focus on her motherhood portraits. That
Mhm.
was when she came in, that was the goal. So what we did was we worked on her mindset of being able to charge 8K and above. We worked on her sales process to be able to do custom proposals.
Mhm.
Because being able to do custom proposals, you'll have a wider range of how much people will pay you.
Yeah.
And then we also worked on being able to hold the silence of not booking because it is hard. It
Mhm.
is very emotionally hard for people to basically like go months without booking or hearing a lot of no's when they're up leveling, and you have to be so sure of the vision if that's like what you're willing to go through in order to
Mhm.
get to your vision.
Mhm.
So that was what we did with that client, and it worked. It was perfect. Like we did a couple of messaging tweaks too, of course, and we did some networking things, but for her, like we knew this is what she wanted. And I have
Yeah.
other clients who they don't want to raise their prices to 10K. That sounds awful, like full body no. So for them, they just want more sustainable income. So we work on recurring revenue with them. So I think when I think about up leveling your wedding business or up leveling your photography business, you really have to ask yourself, like, what am I actually trying to do here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. That reminds me of, well, a few things. While you were talking, I love the thing where you were saying, um, well, first of all, what are you trying to do here? But also that specific person had to get comfortable. Well, you're telling all your clients this, but that specific person had to get comfortable with the silence of like the no's and the things that, when you're taking your business to the next level, that's going to mean that the people that you were serving might not be the best fit in the future. They might grow with you, but they might not be. And I think that that's really hard when we have the vision, but we don't get the instant gratification of it working immediately. And I think that can scare us a lot of times. So I really like that. I like holding the silences. That's a really, really good principle. Because I feel like, especially when you raise your prices, and I went through this recently where I raised my prices recently, and I got an inquiry and it was like really good pricing. Like it was like where I was before. It was like more than where I was before. But I still sent them my new pricing and I was like shaking in my boots, like, oh, maybe I should just like be okay with this. Like maybe I should go back down to that previous pricing. But you're so right. It depends on what it is that you want. Like what is the goal that you have? And I think we can get so caught up in looking around side to side and seeing like, oh, so and so is doing that, so and so is doing that. I want to shoot luxury weddings and we don't even really know what that means, or we don't even know like if we actually want that. Like I love that you said that. um so I think that's so important. I think that success is different to everyone, and I love that you're helping people figure out what success is to them, which I think it's something that I try to help my students with too. And it really is just such a false narrative that like success is this X, Y, and Z thing that looks the same for everyone. It's just not true. And I feel like we buy into it all the time. So I really love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I hear it from my clients all the time of like, "Oh, well, this person's doing this thing over here, or this person over here is charging this thing." And I'm like,
Yeah.
great, you don't know what their bills are.
Yeah.
You don't
So
know
true.
what their childcare situation is. You don't know like what their partner makes. You don't know if this is their full time or their part time. All
Mhm.
you know is the highlight reel on social media
Yeah.
and maybe what they tell you in public or maybe what they tell you at like vendor networking things. You don't know. So
Yeah.
comparing like your journey to the person that like you're like comparing it to honestly is keeping you from the success that is actually like meant for you. So
Mhm.
if you would just get so crystal clear on what it is you actually want and like put your blinders on to what other people are doing, you would
Yeah.
be so much happier. And I think that's honestly why like my clients are constantly getting inquiries, they're constantly raising their prices, they're constantly like like having these huge wins. Like if you've seen me on social media, you see like my clients are doing cool stuff all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And it's because I will literally like they'll come to me and they'll be like, "Well, this person over here said this." And I'm like, "Cool, put your blinders on." Like we're not doing this. Like,
I love that. That's a good phrase. Yeah. I'm gonna tell myself that. I
I
love
mean,
that.
even I have to do it sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 3 years in, 2 years in,
Mhm.
whatever, into this coaching stuff, and like, I just got back from vacation, and like, I was kind of like tuning in with myself and like trying to check in with like, why am I feeling very like unclear with what I'm doing? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, it's because I just spent the energy, like I was in the energy of people who have very different goals than me for
Yeah.
like a week. Of
Hmm.
course, I'm gonna feel like kind of like
Yeah.
off. So this week, like I'm kind of like regrouping and recharging and
Mhm.
getting back into my own energy and my back into my own like this is what I'm doing, who I'm
Mhm.
serving, what I'm creating. And I think that it's important like for us like as wedding vendors to recognize that busy season, you are in a lot of people's energy.
Mm.
So making time to be in your own space and your own energy, even if that's like blocking people or not going to networking events as often or, just taking a full personal day off, just making sure that you're like plugging back into who you are and what you do and who you serve is going to really help you kind of like plug back into like where you're going.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, that's so so good. Something at the conference I just went to, I mentioned a while ago, but Mary Morantz was there. She's so awesome, and her phrase was, the people that are meant for you will come to you, and the people that don't never were meant for you. And I feel like that is it's similar to what you're saying, is like your energy, the things that are meant for you are yours only, and you don't have to be like frantic about like whatever everyone else is doing. But it's so true. I think we absorb so much from other people. Like I know I do, especially if you're like I'm an Enneagram too, so I'm very much like a helper. I'm always absorbing everyone else, like everyone's energy. So yeah, I think I struggle with that a lot too. But I think that's awesome. Just being very self-aware and tapping in. I like how you said you check in with yourself when you tap in and you see, okay, like what's going on? Is everything okay? Let's get back into our own energy. We don't need that other thing. We're putting our blinders back on, that kind of thing. That's perfect. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
tell me,
And if you're
yeah,
if
go ahead.
if you're a wedding vendor and you're listening to this and you're like, how do I plug into my own energy again? Or how
Mhm.
do I check in with myself?
Yeah.
I look for signs. So I look for symptoms and signs. So the symptoms and signs for me was that my self-talk was a little bit more negative. I was feeling a little bit more like I needed more sleep and more rest.
Yeah.
And I also wasn't as interested in listening to the positive things that I normally listen to, like different podcasts or like different books that I read or whatever. If you are noticing those symptoms or those signs, that is probably a good time for you to be like, ooh, I might need to like do a little bit of a declutter of like digital declutter or like, physical declutter to kind of get back into my own energy and my own headspace.
Yeah, I love that. Doing a little check-in with yourself. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I have a question specifically. I know we're derailing the conversation like totally here just for a second, but the consultation and inquiry process, you mentioned that just a few minutes ago. And I just want to circle back to that because I feel like this is where, especially when I'm talking to my mastermind girls, this is where people get tripped up. They feel like it, it's almost like there's so much pressure riding on this one part. Like you were talking about the 300-foot view. I feel like we get stuck in the consultation and inquiry process because we feel like the stakes are so high and we can tend to get really frantic. So I would just honestly love your take as a business coach. Oh, um, okay. I would love your take as a business coach on the consultation and inquiry process. And maybe if you have any tips to kind of up level that part of the process in particular, I think my listeners would really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at these as two separate things. So let's look at
Okay.
it as the inquiry process and let's look at it as the consultation call process.
Yeah.
So the inquiry process. Your inquiry process is somebody has landed on your website, they have gotten to your contact page, and they are filling out your contact form.
Mhm.
Your contact form needs to be intuitive. I was on somebody's contact form recently, and it was actually a client of mine, and I was like, change this immediately. I
Mhm.
will not tolerate it. Like, not in a mean way. I just was like,
Yeah.
this right here is probably like the bottleneck.
Mhm.
So her website was beautiful. Everything was like cohesive. Her brand is amazing. She works with really incredible clients. Her contact form was a if then type of contact form. So if you are wedding, then you go through this drop down. If you are portraits, then you go through this drop down.
Mhm.
But if I was just briefly glancing at this contact form, I could not tell that as a client.
Mhm.
So when I saw it, I was like, well, I wouldn't know which one to choose.
Yeah.
Like, because of the way that it was set up. So I had her change it, and she's had a lot more inquiries because of it. But when you're thinking about your inquiry process, you need to be thinking about, is it easy? Like, is it actually easy for them to get in contact with me? Are
Yeah.
there multiple ways that they can get in contact with me? So
Mhm.
one thing we want to think about is that technology loves to break. It does not like to be nice to us sometimes.
Mhm.
So your contact form might break in the middle of the night and people cannot contact you, and you don't even recognize it because you don't go look at your contact form every single day.
Yeah.
You're just looking at your inbox going, why has no one inquired with me in 2 weeks? So we want to be doing like kind of these check-ins with making sure that it's not broken. So like, once a week or once every 2 weeks, go in and make sure your contact form works, but then also having an alternate way for people to contact you. So having an email address on your contact form, like
Yeah.
so that if somebody just wants to email you directly, they have that option. Or if they are specialized and they don't fall within your normal scope of what you do. So if you're normally a 10-hour wedding photographer, but this is an elopement client who would be an amazing client, they might not fit within your contact form. So they need to be able to email you. So that's the first thing we want to think about with the inquiry process. The second thing we want to think about is what happens after they inquire. So this is kind of like the gap between the inquiry process and the consultation call process.
Mhm.
So what happens after they inquire? Generally, they're going to get some kind of email. So what I like to do and what I tell my clients to do is you need to set up an automatic email that goes through after they submit the contact form that is not your initial like, hi, here's who I am as a person email.
Yeah.
It's just literally a we received your email, here's when you're going to hear back from us kind of autoresponder.
Mhm.
Because I don't know about you, but if I click submit on something and I don't get that pop-up that says, hey, this was submitted correctly,
Yeah.
I'm going to question it like the rest of the day. So we want to do that for our clients to make sure that they know, like, hey, yes, like your inquiry has been seen, and we're going to get to it like by timestamp or however many days later that you're going to send an email back.
Mhm.
So with your inquiry process, we want to make sure that we have some kind of autoresponder, and then you have like some kind of like initial inquiry, like email that you're sending, and then just depending on where you are in business, either you're doing a consultation call, you're sending them pricing, or you're doing everything via email. It just depends on where you are in your business, what you're doing. So
Mhm.
that's the inquiry process.
Mhm.
So
That's
do you have any
awesome.
like thoughts or questions about that
No,
one?
I love that. That's so true though. I feel like when we do our websites, we do it from our like when we design them, we do it from our perspective and we don't always make sure that they're not confusing or that they're like not clunky or they're like we don't always make sure that they're like super easy and user friendly. So I think making it very intuitive is such good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the actual consultation call process. So like,
Mhm.
I mean, I have an entire, like, it's like an hour and a half training on this. Like, my husband used to actually be like my business partner inside of my wedding business. So he
Mhm.
ran calls with me. So
Okay.
he actually came to this workshop that we did
Mhm.
where we ran people through our consultation call process. So it's like, it was pretty extensive, giving a lot of like, how we actually ran people through. But I think the biggest tip that I'm going to give you guys is to have some sort of like, almost like a routine before every single consultation call that you go into that
Mhm.
kind of sets you up to be in that energetic space or that identity space of someone who is like there to listen and serve. You are
Yeah.
not there to be like a talker, you're there to be a listener.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the biggest things I would say is having some kind of like routine before every single consultation call. The second thing I would say about consultation calls is yes, we can put a lot of pressure on it. The reason you're putting pressure on it is because some part of you believes that this is your only shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some part of you believes that everything is riding on you booking this one wedding.
Mhm.
And if you would get rid of that belief and like dig that out and like replace it with a more empowering belief around there's always more clients. I know that my right clients are on their way to me. My clients love to hire me. The right people are going to hire me. If you would
Yeah.
replace the fear with a more empowering belief, you
Mhm.
would not show up in that energy on every single consultation call. You wouldn't feel the pressure because,
Yeah.
like, for me, we used to think about it as like, this is me interviewing them and they're interviewing me.
Mhm.
If we're not a good fit on the call, they can't hire me.
Yeah.
So if you come at it from that perspective, it's going to be a very different energy of you leading the consultation call.
Mhm. Man, oh, I love that. I just want to like snap while you're talking.
I can't
Amazing.
stop, but you can stop for me.
No, that's so good. It really is. It's the shift from like frantic energy, grabbing at every little thing, grasping at all the things, versus like that abundance mindset is what it's like giving. That's what it's like reminding me of is like, no, I have what I need. I have everything I need. It's gonna come to me. Like, and that is such a shift. And it shows up like when your clients get on that call and you're in the abundance mindset, they can tell. Like they can tell the subconscious like cues that you're giving them. So
Yeah.
I think it 100% affects how they see you too. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
body
it.
language cues as well. So
Yeah,
when you are in more kind of like, I need this energy, like I need to make
yeah.
this booking, I need to make this sale. When
Mm,
you are in that energy, you're going to talk faster. Your
yeah,
shoulders are going to be more down. You're going to lean forward, but it's going to be kind of almost this like wide-eyed, like, hey, like, are you going to book me kind of energy? People
yeah.
can feel that.
Hmm.
Versus if you lean back
Yeah,
and your shoulders are back, you're speaking from your diaphragm, you're speaking more consistently, more slowly, you're using you're choosing your words more deliberately. People
yeah.
can feel that.
Hmm.
The thing that you're going to want to think about with that is, do you want the type of client who wants to hire the frantic energy? Do
Yeah.
you want the type of client who wants the grounded energy?
Hmm.
Because that's who's going to hire you, is whichever one that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's so true. And that says a lot about the client too. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's amazing. I feel like I need to like listen back to this episode and take a bunch of notes now.
I actually did it's the Sustainable Photographer podcast. I actually did an
Yeah.
entire like hour-long podcast episode with Ingrid about the consultation call.
Okay.
So if you guys
Yeah.
want to go listen to that, that is
Yeah.
like available online on the internet somewhere.
That'd be great. I'll leave a
Um,
link for that in the description. That's perfect.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aislinn, so much for coming on the podcast. Tell us all where we can find you, follow you, interact with you, buy your coaching, like all the things. Tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live and breathe on Instagram. So you guys can come find me on Instagram at Aislinn Eileen Coaching. So that's where I mostly am. That's where you'll see all my client wins. You'll see a lot of my free education is over there. And then as far as hiring me and working with me, my signature program is called SAP Success Accelerator Program. All of the stuff that we talked about today is stuff I help my clients with. So I help wedding professionals in there, both with their mindset and also optimizing their business and engaging with money in a new way within your business. We do a lot of money mindset work in there, which I love. It helps my clients so much. So that is like my primary space. If you are someone who is listening to this and you are kind of like, you know what, my wedding business is optimized, but I'm kind of really interested in doing coaching or having like an educational branch to my business, that's where Creative Cashflow Mastermind is going to come into play. That's really where I'm working with the like multi six figure like wedding professionals and like just like creatives in general with kind of going more towards a scalable business model. So if that's where you're at and you're trying to scale beyond just having a wedding business, those are the two spaces that I would definitely recommend. And then of course I have like smaller programs like Content Mastery, which is really meant to help you with your content and help you with your messaging on Instagram. And I'm currently, it's almost done. Like it's like, I think May 31st is the end of that program. I'm so excited. I've gotten so much great feedback about Content Mastery and people have just been like, oh, I didn't know Instagram could actually be this easy. So that's been really fun to see. So those are the places you can hire me. And then Instagram is truly the best place that you can like connect with me. And then I do have my own podcast called Clarity Convos for Wedding Pros podcast. So you guys can find me on there. And I'm going to be getting back into the groove of podcasting very soon. So there's going to be new episodes launching hopefully in the next like month or so.
I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, everyone make sure you go check her out. Thank you again for being on the podcast. You're such a wealth of knowledge. Honestly, I feel like we need a part two. So maybe we'll have to coordinate that sometime soon.
Yes, please. I think that'd be so fun. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on the podcast.